Welcome to Leadership Mind, the podcast where we dive deep into the minds of top industry leaders to unearth the hidden treasures of their experience and insights. Join us as we sit down with accomplished professionals for unscripted conversations that reveal the gold nuggets of wisdom from their personal journeys of growth and development. Each episode is a journey into the heart of leadership, where we explore the challenges, triumphs, and lessons learned by those who have navigated the complexities of their respective industries. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered as we uncover the valuable gems of knowledge that have shaped the careers and lives of our guests. With us today is Carson Rowh. Carson is a driven entrepreneur and business leader with a successful track record of working in the retail, nonprofit, and real estate industries. He is the co-CEO of the Nebraska-born retail furniture company Home Trends. People that work with and for him describe him as a great coach and trainer, full of knowledge and always willing to help. On this episode, Carson shares with us his journey to becoming a CEO and highlights many of the struggles along the way. So grab a seat, pour yourself a cup of inspiration, and tune into Leadership Mind as we mine the depths of leadership excellence and unearth the priceless wisdom waiting to be discovered. All right, welcome. Welcome to Leadership Mind, Carson. We are so excited to have you here today. Uh, I wanted to just take some time to really hear about your story. And what we're going to do is take a deep dive into your leadership style, your story as a leader. And before we get started, I wanted to share a little story. You
Uh-oh.
know, interviewing a furniture retail CEO is a lot like assembling flat pack furniture. At first, you think, oh my gosh, this is a great idea. This is going to look beautiful. This is going to be amazing. And then you think, oh my God, is this really going to come together? How is this going to work? And can I do this? But then, with patience, everything falls into place beautifully, assuming that we don't lose any screws along the way. So, here's hoping that we don't misplace any important questions today and we chat about all things leadership.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I'm sorry I made this so difficult on you. I know we've tried to schedule this a couple times and timing just didn't work with everything else going on, but I'm happy to do it and really looking forward to talking with you today.
Amazing. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in the furniture retail industry? And how did those initial experiences shape your leadership style?
Well, I'll go back against your question a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I've never met anybody that was inspired to have a career in furniture. So I think, and that's not really true. Of course, some great family-owned companies or somebody whose family member worked in the industry. I think there's always a fondness and a lot of repeat there. But I think the vast majority of us in the furniture industry stumbled into that thinking that we were going to end up somewhere else. So, what a happy accident. And I think if you go back to when I first started in this business and how did I end up being here forever? I remember waking up one day and thinking to myself, this is the first time in my life I've ever had a job where I didn't dread going to work. And I think that was kind of a sign to me that
Yeah.
maybe I had stumbled across something. And I love meeting and working with and mentoring young people. And I was talking to a 20 something that works for us a week or so ago. And that was the exact comment he made. He's like, man, this is the first job I've ever had where I didn't dread doing it. And I'm like, that's me. That's exactly what I said, probably at about your age. And and we kind of ended up here. So, that's the way life works. I don't think most of the time the script goes perfectly according to plan. And frankly, in hindsight, thank goodness, right? That thing I was pursuing, I can't imagine would have provided the kind of reward that this career has. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you start out? Where did you think you would be before you ended up in the retail industry?
Yeah, perfect. When I was in high school, I really wanted to be an attorney, and that was, I wanted to go to law school, and I still kind of do, to be honest with you. One of my good friends went to law school and ended up doing something else with it, but I think that would be fun and cool or whatever. But that was my intention, and I stated that out loud to a lot of people. And the girl that I was dating at the time in high school, her mother, who by the way is my wife now, but her mother worked as a clerk of the district court for 35 years, and she mentioned to me or pulled me aside and said, I've worked in this industry. I've worked around lawyers, attorneys my entire life, and something happens to them over time. They change or become affected by the work that they do. And I thought about that for a while, and for whatever reason, that was an impactful statement for me at the right time. And so I decided that wasn't going to be my path. And so then I was on to finance is what I originally went to college for. And that was my major through, junior and a half year in college. And that was mostly generated from the fact that when I was very young, I read a lot of financial self-help books, investing books, things like that. And I was fascinated by the stock market and personal finance. And so that just seemed like a great fit for me. And so that was going to be the path. And then, hit junior level corporate finance and hit a big wall and went, wow, that's pretty tough. I survived, but I thought, man, if it gets any worse than this, I don't know if I want to do this for a living. And so I ended up changing to business administration, and that's what I got my degree in. But oddly enough, when I think I was technically, it was after my junior year, the summer between my junior and senior year in college. I met some guys and they were doing some outside sales, door-to-door sales type stuff. And so I got into that, really had a lot of fun. I was not very successful, to be frank with you, but enjoyed that process. We would, drive to these appointments in various towns around Nebraska, and we would listen to sales training or motivational or mindset, cassette tapes at the time. And I was really intrigued by that and really kind of, that flipped a switch for me. And I've always had an interest in that really ever since. So that was fun. And then from there, I got an offer to work for an insurance company. And, the promise, it was a purely commission sales job. And the promise was that, this was going to be incredible. I could make, probably better money than most of the graduates coming out of college. And so I decided, let's do it. And I dropped out of college, really kind of about halfway through what would be my senior year, basically, in terms of hours taken. And, gosh, all the people that cared about me said, be careful, right? It's so hard to come back. And I'm way too smart for that. I understand how it works much better than they do. And so I said, oh, it's not going to be a problem. First of all, I think this is going to be really successful. I think it's going to be a great thing. And if it doesn't, it won't be a big deal. I'll be able to slide right back in. Anyway, long story short, within a year, I had really kind of failed out of that career and restarted, with the furniture company and at the time, and it took me about 4 years before I could finally get my life rearranged. Like once you get into the mindset or the habit of working every day and coming home and I can't remember if I was in the process of getting married or whatever around that time, but life gets busy and it gets really hard to think about how do I break this off when I've got bills to pay and debt and everything else, and try to get back into the college lifestyle and finish this degree up. So it took me about 4 years to get back, and thankfully I did. I started taking night classes and finished my degree, partly in person and partly online, night classes, things like that. And so, but it was a longer detour than I expected, for sure.
Yeah. Sounds like you have had a lot of opportunities to persevere
Yeah.
and to look at some different situations and ask the question, what do I want to continue to pursue? And what do I want to how do I want to continue to move forward in my life? So, what was your first job in the retail industry?
Yeah. It was at that time, it was called Top Hat Furniture. It's the
Uh-huh.
predecessor to Home Trends.
Uh-huh.
So we bought Top Hat Furniture. Corey and I did after we after we were there for a while, and Home Trends was our company that we created basically. But yeah, I applied. Here's a story. I was trying to think, like, how did I apply, or why did I apply?
Uh-huh.
I stopped in a furniture store because I was living in a house with four other college age friends at that time, and for whatever reason I wanted a futon.
Hmm.
And so there was a furniture store on the main drag in Kearney, and I stopped in there to see if they had a futon, which they did not. However, I ran into a guy that I knew from the door-to-door selling days. That
Hmm.
was, I would have considered a friend. He was actually from South Dakota, but he's
Hmm.
working in this furniture store in Kearney, Nebraska.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? How did you get here? And anyway, he met the landlord's daughter at the sales office that was in our Kearney location, even though he was like a regional manager based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, "Yep, I met her. We're getting engaged. I decided to move to Kearney, and I got this furniture selling thing. It's not very hard, and you make pretty good money." And I'm like, at this time in my life, I'm coming out of my failed insurance career, and I had racked up some debt because in that insurance business, it was costing me $1,500 a week just to work there, with all the travel and all of that was paid for by myself, and so
Hmm.
it seemed like a great deal, and I had a friend that worked there and all that sort of thing. So anyway, I went and applied, and got called back the next day, got hired, started in the training process. Those are some funny stories, probably for another day, what training looked like then versus what it is now.
Uh-huh.
But the intent still, even at that time, the intent was never to work in furniture retail. It was a thing I was going to do for 6 months, and then I was going to redivert back to college and
Hmm.
back to the financial services industry. So even while, even the first 6 to 12 months while I was selling furniture as a retail salesperson, I was still out applying with, Merrill Lynch and all these, financial services, financial planning type companies, and
Hmm.
actually got two job offers. I got the one I really, really wanted, and was really excited about that. And then I just kind of, again, that was about the time I was starting to wake up to this idea that maybe this is not bad. Like, I don't dread going to work here like I have at a lot of previous jobs. And I've worked a lot of manual labor jobs in the past and that sort of thing. But, I think I was starting to realize maybe that prior to that, I had been kind of chasing this dream of whatever it was, fast riches, or this vision, this dream of what I thought I could be, by listening to these recruiters and different things like that. And yet here I was in this role that frankly I was enjoying. I didn't dread coming to work on time. People seemed to respect me, and I was trying to kind of maybe reset my foundation a little bit after traveling a lot, dropping out of school, and going to work for this other company and all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I think maybe the stability kind of pulled me in a little bit as well. And
Yeah.
so that's how I started. And, gosh, here I am after it was only going to be 6 months. I think I just crossed the 28-year mark last month. So
Wow.
anyway, time
Congratulations.
flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, congratulations. That's a nice long career there.
Yeah.
So, so you decided to start selling furniture, and uh how did you move up in the company? How did you take on like new leadership roles? How did you expand into, or did you, or how, what
Yeah.
was that journey like?
It very interesting, with a lot of little seasons in life sprinkled in,
Hmm.
and I want to tell them all because I think, again, I see all these young people come into our company, and some of them get it and stay and are successful, and others leave. And mostly though, what I see, especially with the people that leave, is when I run into them 3, 5 years later, they're really not any better off. They're still searching for that magic bullet that never comes, right? And so I think talking about the kind of the tough road that I had coming up, I think it is a little bit important. So, I started, working on the floor as a retail salesperson, 20 something. Um, and, frankly, was not very successful. I was living in a house with my college buddies. Two of them were not working at the time. One of them had a girlfriend that lived in the house as well. It was parties till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and none of them had to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to go do anything, right?
Hmm.
And it became pretty chaotic. And and really not a conducive place to be if you're trying to get better, if you're trying to grow up a little
Mhm.
bit, which at that point in time, frankly, I needed to. And so um, the owner's son was up at the store, and he was working at the warehouse at the time. And he said, "Hey, I bought this house." He was about my age. He said, I bought this house and I'm fixing it up, and I'm going to, fix it up and flip it, or fix it up and sell it like a lot of the real estate people do." And he said, "Right now I've got an extra room, and I'm going to rent it out or whatever." And I thought, that would be a nice move to make, to get out of this, jungle lifestyle that I'm living in with my college buddies.
Mhm.
And so I went ahead and moved in with him, built a great friendship with him,
Mhm.
and got out of that chaotic environment. And I think that was about the 1 year mark of being in the business. And again, I told you I was not very good.
Mhm.
I was not very focused. I was still partying quite a bit myself. And when I wasn't partying, I was tired and, maybe not focused and that sort of thing. I think I worked really hard. I showed up every day. I was dependable, all those sorts of things.
Mhm.
I worked a lot of extra days that nobody asked me to.
Mhm.
But I wasn't really effective, and I wasn't really focused. And so moving in with my friend allowed me to, calm my lifestyle down a little bit, get
Mhm.
some good night's sleep, focus on work. And by the way, again, coming out of that, dropping out of college and trying the insurance game, I had amassed a pretty good amount of debt.
Mhm.
And so, while I was selling insurance, I had this really nice car that I had bought, beautiful car, and, something that somebody my age really shouldn't be able to afford. And I couldn't either, by the way, as it turned out, right? The results of the insurance game were not as lucrative as I had, banked on, I guess, when I got the vehicle.
Mhm.
So I'm living with this guy. My lifestyle is trying to simmer down a little bit, and I've got this debt that's, really hanging over my head. And so, so I sold the car. I went to a dealership. I traded the car in for one that was much less expensive. I
Mhm.
took the difference back in cash, and rather than giving it to the bank, which is what you're supposed to do, I paid off credit card debts and other debts that had accumulated. And but money was tight, cash flow was tight, so I didn't have enough money to register this other vehicle that I had traded for, right?
Mhm.
And so, I had the 30-day dealer plates that you get when they, give you a new car, and you're supposed to go to the courthouse in a couple weeks and get the new plates and all that stuff. And I probably drove that car for 6 months with expired, temporary plates from the dealer,
Mhm.
because again, I was completely maxed out. I was trying to pay down that debt. And so, it was really, really hard, right? Like
Mhm.
the trips to the grocery store were really careful. I wasn't taking any trips. I wasn't buying anything cool. I remember, probably for 3 months one time, my lunch every single day was a 25-cent box of macaroni and cheese, and I would scoop out a little spot in the middle like mashed potatoes, and I would fill up the middle with hot sauce, and I loved it. It was good enough, right? But like,
Mhm.
everything I could do to save a dollar was really important to me during that time, and it was stressful
Mhm.
being under that amount of debt. But I think the beauty of that is because I was so financially limited, I had no choice but to do two things, and that was work and sleep. And so, through the course of that, I think I got more mature. I think I got more dependable. I started to perfect my craft in terms of selling.
Mhm.
I got pretty consistent in terms of the results that I was producing on the sales floor. And so that's kind of the way it went for, let's call it, the first 3.5 years.
Mhm.
Um, and I was on a staff with, I was in my early 20s. I was on a staff with another guy in his maybe late 20s. There was a lady probably in her mid 30s. There was three older guys, probably in the mid 40s to 50, 60 years
Mhm.
old. A couple of those guys had been there a long time and had been pretty successful and all that sort of thing. So to a certain degree, I was kind of a little kid on that staff.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know this for sure, but and so, gosh, man, maybe on a future episode we can bring in the former owner and my mentor and friend,
Mhm.
Ed, that owned the company at that time. Why he chose me to step into that next management role that was available. But I think it was because, my sales were not number one on the staff,
Mhm.
but I was dependable. I was consistent. I followed the rules. You know, I had a I had a pretty disciplined mindset around, this is how we do it and this is how we don't do it. And some of the people on the staff that maybe sold more,
Mm-hmm.
could play fast and loose with the rules a little bit, right? If they had to bend a rule to get a deal to go by, they would do that. And that just wasn't my mindset. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, my belief is that he recognized that in me. And like, that's the type of trait you probably want to pass on
Uh-huh.
to somebody that's going to, train new people coming into the organization or set the tone for how you want your staff to act and behave and treat customers and things like that. I think the integrity and the consistency
Uh-huh.
is probably a big part of that. And so I think it was about the 3.5, 4 year mark. I got called in, and at that time, that company had a couple of what we would call full line furniture stores. They've got all the different bedrooms, dining rooms, living rooms, mattresses from a lot of different manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
We also had in the Carney store, we had a floor covering department. So we did residential and commercial carpet, wood, tile flooring, things like that. And actually, that's how I met Corey. He was the carpet department manager
Uh-huh.
at that store. And so we were similar in age. Corey's a few years older than me, but we were similar in age. And about a year in, we kind of got to talking a little bit and got to know each other pretty well. And anyway, and then they wanted to hire a sales manager to hire, train salespeople, store managers at what at that time was, again, 2 full line stores, and then they had 4, I believe, 4 or 5 little clearance stores, very small, 5,000 square feet, no frills, right? The name of the store was Self-Service Furniture, if that tells you, right? Like letting the customer know right when you come in the door, like, you're going to have to do this, right? We'll give you a great price, but we're not going to deliver it. You may not get certain return policies or warranty stuff that you might get other places. You're not going to get fancy decorations, right? You're just here to get a couch, and you want the best deal. And so we had 4 or 5 of those, and a couple of those full line stores. And gosh, I mean, I think being a manager, being a leader, or whatever you want to call those things, like it's such an incredible journey. And you start out feeling overwhelmed and out of place, I think, and maybe a little bit directionless, like, where do I take this from here?
Mm-hmm.
And couple funny stories I'll tell about that. One, so they pulled me in, they offered me this, it was like a district sales manager position, right? I was going to travel to all 6 stores and hire salespeople and train and hold people accountable for their numbers and all this kind of stuff. And so I got the promotion, and that was cool. I was pretty excited, right? And the next day I came into work, and I thought they would grab me and sit down and go, okay, here's what we're going to train you on. Here's what we want you to do next Monday, right? I
Mm-hmm.
thought they'd tell me what to do,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't say anything. And so I kind of, I did my regular job that day and the next day, and like, I think a couple weeks went by, and like nobody ever mentioned it again. Like they pulled me into the office, and they gave me this promotion, and they said, you're going to do this. And they mentioned a couple of ideas that they thought would be nice. And then that was it. Like, I didn't hear from, and I kept waiting for them to say, okay, on Thursday, we want you to go visit with this store and meet those people, or I didn't know what to do. And so anyway, again, couple weeks, maybe a month, honestly, I finally thought, well, maybe they're waiting on me to do something, right? So I went. There was two owners at the time. They were partners and brothers, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So I went in to one of them, and I said, okay, well, I think I'm going to go out and visit the stores and meet the store managers and that sort of thing. And they're like, okay, that sounds good, right? Like, so I did, like, the following day or days or whatever. I don't remember the exact timeline, but like, here I am. I'm at that point, I'm like 24, 25 years old, something like that. And I jump in the car and I go drive the hour or whatever it is to this next store. And I walk in and I introduce myself, because I don't think I knew that particular manager, and I don't think they knew why I was there, by the way, and just kind of introduced myself and told them, I'm here to support you, and what do you think's working well? And I'm quite sure they were apprehensive. I don't know if they thought I was there to fire them or maybe just get in their business when I didn't need to be getting in their business. I don't think they were used to a lot of support,
Uh-huh.
from the ownership at that time. And so anyway, gosh, I did this, whatever it was, 5, 6 store tour. I went out and met everybody, and I'm 24 years old, and I got these 50-year-old men and women store managers sitting in front of me, and they're crying their eyes out about, the lack of support that they've been getting, or the problems in the business that aren't being addressed. And I mean, man, you want to talk about baptism by fire? Like, just, day before yesterday, all I had to do was clock in and I'm good. I don't
Uh-huh.
need to worry about anybody else. And, I didn't get any specific training on processes that we wanted to install specifically or anything like that. I just wanted to go out and kind of establish relationships and really kind of ease my way into, leading, I guess you might say. But it was just incredible. I just remember sitting in front of a couple of these, store managers that are twice my age, crying their eyes out. And I'm supposed to, I don't know what, solve the problem or make them feel better or whatever. I didn't really know. So anyway, that was quite the interesting time. And so, over time, I again started doing all the hiring, the training. I placed the ads to advertise for a new salesperson in a given town, or even a new manager, and I visited each store every week.
Mhm.
And we did trainings in the morning, and we did helped work with salespeople on their individual numbers and hold them accountable, and store managers. And I tried to help streamline processes, make sure the stores were doing things the same way. And
Mhm.
that's always a battle with any multiple location business. I was trying to install some process mindset there, and the importance of that consistency and doing it the same way every time. And so, certainly was given some tools, I guess, the first year or so. Corey and myself, they flew us to Toronto, and we went through a retail management training program, and
Mhm.
so I tried my best to implement that program that we learned, which we still use to this day, by the way. Um, so there was that, and then I was pretty good. I was a pretty good college student, and my mom's an English teacher and that sort of thing, and I've been reading a lot of business books and different things like that. And so I worked pretty hard developing documentation
Mhm.
for training, hiring, operational stuff, things
Mhm.
like that. And so, and really trying to uh, get this thing more professionalized, I
Yeah.
guess, rather than just a bunch of little stores that everybody kind of does what they want to do,
Uh-huh.
and that sort of thing. And so, gosh, I'd say certainly some successes, lots of failures.
Mhm.
One of the things I think that I thought at the time, and I see almost every new manager now uh, make, I guess I'm going to call it a mistake, but there's parts of it that are not. And that is just, when you're an employee and you see a boss or a manager, and maybe you disagree with what they're doing or how they're doing it, or how they talk or whatever. Like, I think everybody thinks, man, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be that way, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I would be nice. I'd be the player's coach. Everybody would think I was cool, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's what I tried to do as a 24, 25, 26-year old.
Uh-huh.
I tried to be the player's coach. I tried to
Yeah.
be everybody's buddy. I tried to be everybody's shoulder to cry on. And truly, I think, pretty much everybody liked me, right? Like, I got a lot of phone calls on, at night and on the weekends and every other time from employees that would tell me their life stories and life problems and share with me all kinds of stuff from, domestic violence and everything on down. And,
Mhm.
and, and, there's parts of that I enjoyed and found value. And I thought I was giving value, and I tried my best to give value. I think my heart was in the right place.
Mhm.
However, I would say, you know, I think I lost sight of maybe a little bit of the prioritization, right?
Mhm.
Like, what's most important,
Mhm.
what's next, um, and so things like a true system and a true sense of accountability were
Mhm.
not something that were strong in the company. Certainly not strong with me. I didn't know how to be great at having that tough conversation when it needed to be had, but do it with a gentle hand so that the outcome is we're working together.
Mhm.
Um, And so again, I wanted to be, the buddy. I wanted to be the players coach.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we did some good things. I think people liked me. I think I was good to people. However, because I wasn't holding people accountable enough, and because I didn't really understand the priority of business is the business, um, and I put individual relationships probably too high up on that. Um, frankly, there were salespeople that were not performing,
Mm-hmm.
and we would allow them to underperform while feeling the pressure of underperforming for month after month after month after month. And so I would sit in meetings with an underperforming salesperson, and they're crying and they're miserable, and and what I realized was they wanted to succeed. They wanted, you know what I mean? I think there's this misconception sometimes when people aren't doing well, that for some reason it's just because they don't want it bad enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you need to wake up and get serious. And I'm not saying there's not cases like that, but what I found as a young manager is like people don't want to fail; they want to succeed. They believed in that dream that you talked about when you hired them.
Mm-hmm.
And and because I didn't have the courage to either, you know, do the hard things or have the hard conversations that would get them to change their behavior, which is the only thing that really changes outcomes. It's not as much as I love mindsets and all that other stuff. It's behavior that really changes outcomes. If I didn't have the courage to force them to change that behavior that's going to give them a different outcome, or have the courage to let them go and let them be successful somewhere else, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was doing them a favor by not firing them, for
Mm-hmm.
example, by not letting them go. And yet every week when I went to that store and she's crying, does that look like a great life to live?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So here I am trying to not do something that's going to hurt somebody's feelings, or do what I think is the right people thing to do. And yet the reality is that I was holding them back from going and finding that thing that they would have had joy in, or that they would have had success in. And if it's not this role, probably the sooner the better for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like there's somebody out there that's right for the position that she's sitting in or he's sitting in,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't come in the company because this person's holding that chair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm withholding the right opportunity to that person out there that really wants it and would enjoy it and would be successful at it, because I don't have the courage to tell the person who isn't enjoying it and who isn't successful at it. I don't have the courage to look them in the eye and say, maybe there's a better place, maybe there's a better opportunity out there
Mm-hmm.
for you. And so, you know, in some ways, I look at that early part of my management experience, and I wouldn't be anybody that I am now without that. So it's not like I can go back and change that, but I look a lot at a lot of that, and I kind of feel like, that was a failure and a really painful lesson that I've used to try to bridge the gap in the second part of my management career. I always say I got an opportunity to reset,
Mm-hmm.
which we can talk about what happened with the company and how I moved up and stuff like that later. But in my second go round with management, I had a completely different take.
Yeah.
I think I was still good to people. People loved working for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to feel respected, and I wanted people to feel cared for.
Mm-hmm.
But I gained a new appreciation for the importance of the idea that if we're not winning as a team, it can't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're doing something as an individual part of that team that's harming us, whether it's not doing the activities that we want you to do to maintain the sales that this company requires to keep employing you,
Mm-hmm.
or not following up with customers that gives us a bad reputation in the community and impacts the other people on staff who are doing that things, but it impacts this company's reputation and thereby negatively impacts somebody else's life that depends on this company for their food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just became very non-negotiable. Like, this is what we do here. And I also hated those tough conversations so much that I tried to preempt those tough conversations by being immediate. And so rather than let this thing go on and I'm unhappy with you and you're unhappy with this place or whatever, and then we have a really big conversation and everybody's mad or hurt feelings or whatever, I would see somebody start to slightly deviate.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this is how we do it. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. And then that's on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, I see them not do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have this conversation in a month where I got to rein you back in and break this bad habit. And so I'm like, I became immediate with it. Like, I'm going to go walk over and say something right now at this very second because I don't want it to get out of hand. And then I got to reel it back in. And that becomes a big, painful experience for everybody, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it worked really well. Like, I think to see me in the whatever it was, 2006, 2007 time frame versus the person I was in 2003, it would be like night and day.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I found the opposite experience. I found, we were mostly able to, get people successful. We had a lot of fun with those staffs when I was in that time frame. We had people that would tell their friends it's the best job they ever had. Like, that's music to my ears. That's what I want, right? I want us to win. I want us to be really serious about our business. And I want people to go, man, I love being here. I love the people that I'm with. And so, ultimately, I think that's what a great manager can bring to the table is you get both. It can't be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned courage, not in the beginning, not really wanting, not having the courage to have those difficult conversations or just wanting to be friends with everybody. Um, how did you, or how have you been able to build up more courage? Is it just a behavioral thing where you just take an action and it's played itself out that way and it just gets easier? Or how have you built up courage, or how have you changed your behaviors and mindset to be able to have difficult conversations immediately?
yeah, I think it's a lot of things, right? I think I saw the result when you let things go too far and it becomes then too painful.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't know that when I was 23 years old. I hadn't let somebody go on so long and then realized that I'd built up this monumental problem that was going to be painful to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned from experience, I think, and seeing that ultimately this isn't going to be a good outcome for them either, right? So that misunderstanding that I had that somehow being nice and letting things go
Mm-hmm.
was somehow better for them
Mm-hmm.
or easier for them, it wasn't, it isn't, it's never going to be that way. I think that was part of it. No question, behavior is a big part of that. I would say even to this day, when I have to have one of those really difficult accountability conversations, and I do still have to do that now, even as an owner. And by the way, I would say they're even bigger and harder now as an owner than they ever were then.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, going in and saying, I have to check the box that I did this, right? And so, thinking about, how I want the phrases to go so that I don't try to place blame where it's not due, where I don't try to make the person feel bad about who they are or what they've done necessarily if it's not warranted. So kind of pre-framing the conversation. How do I want it to look? How do I want it to go? What do I anticipate might be some pushback from this person
Mm-hmm.
that I can gently defend the company standards or defend what I'm trying to do while not negotiating that either, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of managers, especially the ones that fear these conversations, they'll go in with a game plan. I'm going to say this, and then the employee denies it or argues back or has a different point to try to overcome, and then they capitulate and start negotiating on what they intended, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have to think those scenarios through, and that's a skill and a practice, just like writing a term paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got an entry paragraph where you're going to state your theme and your points, and then you have each paragraph for a point, and then you have a summary. Like, that's kind of the way that conversation needs to be scripted and practiced, and you get better at it over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's absolutely just a bare behavior, even if you don't feel it here, for sure that behavior has to happen. But I think a big bridge for me, getting over that hump and making that change around, again, the kind of probably the 2006 timeframe. I had again, as a young manager, I had sat in front of these people that were not successful and not happy, and it was painful. And I was working an extraordinary amount of hours. I mean, it was very, very common for me to travel 6 days a week, leave before the sun came up and get home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night for 6, sometimes even 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, not only did I feel like I wasn't having the type of impact that I wanted, I was overworked. I was losing my hobbies. I wasn't seeing my friends a lot. There was just a lot of compounding factors that I didn't like there. And when I got the opportunity to reboot, so eventually, I just want to throw this in here. In about the 2004-5 range,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, the current owner partners split up,
Mm-hmm.
and they divided the company in two. And one of the owners was going to keep one store, the Kearney store, where Corey and I live, and that's kind of our home. So one store was going to keep that store. And the two primary leaders in the company at that time were myself and Corey, besides the owners.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Corey was going to go with one owner,
Mm-hmm.
and the other owner was going to take the other 5 stores, and I was going to go with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that owned the Kearney store that was, that Corey was going to go with, he's the guy that I respected more than anything. He's the guy that I considered my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
During the process of these partners splitting up, it got kind of weird around, there was not communication flow like there should have been to run a company.
Mm-hmm.
And, and eventually you could feel it. I caught on to that even before I knew that the company was splitting up. And,
Mm-hmm.
but this guy that I wasn't going to go with was in the other camp, or the other half of the division, I guess you might say. And I didn't want to, number one, I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing, right? Traveling 6 days a week and working 12 hours a day. And I didn't, I really respected the other owner much more than the one that I would have been going with. And so, I went to that, to the owner that was getting the one store that Corey was going with. And I kind of threw myself on my sword. And I said, I don't know if there's any way I have a say in this, but if there's any possibility, I want to go with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, to be frank with you, I can't afford both of you. And so I think they made me wait it out a day or two or something like that while they talked about it. But anyway, Ed finally came back to me and said, I can't afford you, so you're gonna have to figure out a way to pay for yourself. Which was, I got what I wanted, but that's a burden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that somebody else is taking on my salary, and that's not part of the financial plan in the middle of a business split up, which I'm sure is financially stressful, right? Already. And so when we converted to an Ashley store in 2006, and I went with Ed, and he made me the store manager. So I went from being, multiple store down to a single store. So I managed the retail side, front of the house,
Mm-hmm.
stores, sales, CSR, that sort of thing. Corey managed the warehouse, back of the house operations. And, again, he said, you're going to have to find a way to pay for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that time period, or that day, where I just made a decision in my mind, like, I only work for two people in this world, and it's my wife and it's Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what anybody else's opinion is of me, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if we get a year down the road and Ed decides I'm not paying my way, I'm not paying for myself, this could be it. This could be over for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and obviously, my wife was a big, important part of that. So it took a lot of the fear out of it from me on, what does that salesperson think about me? Or what does that candidate think about me? Or whatever the case is, because honestly, it didn't matter what they thought about me.
Mm-hmm.
If Ed didn't think I was paying my way, if he didn't think I was worth him taking that risk on me,
Mm-hmm.
then their opinion wasn't going to save me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a big piece of the weight that made it easier for me to really fully accept the responsibility of doing what I was supposed to do anyway, right? And that is protect the company, protect the values, transfer the processes and the consistency and the way we do things here
Mhm.
on a consistent basis. Try to grow sales. Try to hire, train, and retain good people so that
Mhm.
they give a customer good experience. And so, again, just another step in a long growth process, but a pretty big one. I'd say that 2004 to 2008 timeframe was pretty valuable and pretty instrumental in making me who I am for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of different factors that influenced how you showed showed up in the job, showed up for the retail management, and then had a lot of opportunities for learning. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to sit down and learn about because again, I think that when we think of CEO and we think of it's like you've arrived, like you're successful and you're at the mountaintop and you don't see all of the struggle behind it. You don't like see all of the things that have happened up until this point. And this is kind of that peeling back the curtain of there is struggles behind it. There is perseverance that needs to happen. There is courageous action. There are all of these different things. And then momentum starts to build and you get stronger, get more grounded in your leadership style and how you're going to show up for the company and for yourself and for the employees that are coming along with you and having somebody else look at you and say like, yes, you are worth this. And yes, we are, taking a gamble on you. And we think that this is a risk worth taking. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I really look back over whatever it is, 20, 30 years, and it's just kind of like waves in the ocean, right? You got the peaks and the valleys, and it's easy, I guess, maybe when you're at the peak of the wave to think that this is how life is and it's always going to go on that way, and it's just not, right? The valley is coming, right?
mhm.
And likewise, when you're in the valley, it's easy to think, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end. It's too hard. I'm never going to make it, whatever it is. And that's not true either, right? The peak is coming, the rise is coming. And you can see that like every few years, there's this little crisis or pain moment that causes a learning. And, and then you get stronger in the broken places, right? And you get a new muscle that is an experience that you can carry with you and makes you more confident in dealing with things in the future. And yeah, I don't think you could really truly arrive like without that in between time, without those learnings, without that scar tissue. I think it'd be really difficult, right? And I think that's why if you look at the success statistics of companies, in their succession planning, like choosing the next leader, like a lot of missteps there, and I think it's for that reason, right? It's hard to recreate this stuff on paper or in the classroom or by reading a book or any of the other methods that I love just as much as the pain of real life,
Mhm.
but it's hard to recreate that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any advice for like a young person or even, and just anybody that is struggling right now in the pursuit of their career and they're in a place of they're in a valley and they can't see their way out? Do you have any advice or do you have a mantra that you've fallen back on over the course of your life to kind of help you get to the next peak?
I wish I could think of a good mantra. I'm sure I have. You've seen my computer. I've got 100 quotes that flash across my screen all day long, and I do a lot of reading and all that. But I think the idea I would pass along is you know uh, perseverance and being a stayer is I think the missing puzzle piece for a lot of people, right? And so what I mean by that is, I've heard people say, "Oh gosh, man, like people of my socioeconomic background or racial background or education background, like we can't get ahead or there's no opportunities or whatever." And it's like I've seen in our business over 30 years, I've seen you know, dozens of people that would fall into any of those categories that frankly could be the president of this company right now. And I would have been happy to make them that, right? Like they had the skills, they had the talent. I recognized it early on. Like, I loved their potential. They absolutely could have done that, but it didn't happen fast enough, right? Or they got distracted by the shiny thing and they didn't stick with it long enough to gain a high level of competence and expertise, right? I mean, there's some books out there. I can't think of them right now, but they talk about, uh, the old saying, like, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? And then there's this alternate idea that as soon as you start doing that thing for money, it stops being fun anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
You worked as a raft guide years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like after your third summer, did you get a little bit tired of the sun and the smell of the rubber, right?
And the camping and the outdoors,
Yeah,
the sun.
and your clothes smelling like smoke all the time, right? But like
Mhm.
when I'm sitting in my office and I'm stressed out and it's been a long week, man, that sounds pretty incredible to me, right?
Mhm.
I'm a whitewater kayaker. That's one of my passions, and I've seriously thought before, like maybe I should go, be a kayak a school instructor or a guide or work at an outfitter or something along that line. But truthfully, I think that would take the joy away from it for me. Not that I wouldn't still love certain parts of that, but like, when I go out, on a river in the wilderness or whatever, like, I don't have clients to deal with, right? I don't have some arbitrary standards I need to measure up to. Part of the reason I'm there and part of the joy of that is that I don't have any of that, right? Like I'm there to escape that part of my life. And so, some people would say if you try to go do the thing that you consider fun or that gives you joy, you'll end up ruining that too,
Mhm.
right? So leave that in its protected place. Segment your life, leave that thing. Like if you've got something that lights your fire, gosh, why would you want to pollute it with all the ideas and thoughts that are running through the rest of your busy, hectic, crazy, stressful life, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so they would say, you know, the secret is not to find that thing you love that doesn't feel like work. The secret is to gain competence in something to the point where you're let's call it whatever, a subject matter expert, or you're known to be highly competent in your field. And I promise you'll start to love and get energy from that work, right? When you're really good at it and you're known for being good at it. And that's, you know, and you've got this dividing line. Work is work and play is play. That ultimately that's probably the most fulfilling path. And
Mhm.
so, how that relates back to these young people and the advice is I see so many people that have worked for us that had all the skill in the world that could be any position in this company they want, probably including the one that I have now, but they didn't stick with it long enough, right? They were looking for the next opportunity, or they got frustrated because they weren't, vice president after 1 year or 2 years or whatever. And, they decided to go somewhere else and chase that fast turnaround to get to their dream. And they didn't find it there either. And they didn't find it at the next place either. And now 10 years have gone by. You've not gained any long-term competence or expertise in anything.
Mhm.
So the idea that you start to love the work that you do because you gain competence and skill and confidence with that, it's going to elude you forever if you're looking for it to happen by magic. And so, and by the way, that not only impacts somebody's happiness, but it impacts their finances too. There's a compounding effect to staying with a company, getting those opportunities, not having the change cost of having to start over again and move the 401k and do all these kinds of things. So, you look at a lot of successful people, if they've saved the number that they want for retirement, or they've had a great career or whatever, and you'll notice a pretty common theme. They've been with whatever that thing is. I was going to say a company, but it doesn't have to be a company. It can be your company, right? It can be your thing.
Mhm.
But the idea that you can do something for a couple of years and you're going to get everything you want, there's just a few too many YouTube influencers promoting that idea. And I would suspect some of those don't live that life when the camera's off either. So,
Mhm. Yeah, that is a mic drop moment there to just leave us on for today's conversation of stick with it, persevere, when you're in, even when you're on the peaks, even when life is going really, really well, there's something about perseverance that is very powerful to continue to move forward and then sticking with something, learning the competency. And really, you become an expert when you stick with something long enough and you have those different experiences. And today you have really highlighted that for us that when there are challenges that arise, if you stick with it, if you keep moving forward, there's going to be this experience that nobody else in the world can take from you because all of a sudden this is yours. You've gone through those difficult conversations. You've gone through those times of not knowing what the heck to do or where you were at. And now you are in a place where you can do that better and have that experience that you get to move forward and take with you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot another quote that I think applies to that, being in that valley. And I just love this one. It's, if you're going through hell, don't stop.
uh,
Right?
yeah,
I love it. Anyway, good stuff. Joanne, it's been awesome talking with
yeah,
you today. It's fun. So let's
yeah,
let's do it again sometime.
we will.
All
We'll
right. Sounds good.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye. So I just got done having that interview with Carson, and I am so excited to hear all of those nuggets of wisdom that he was sharing today. I really have personally struggled sometimes with like looking at people and thinking, especially when I think that they're successful, like CEOs or presidents or, people in that have these very high titles in corporations. And I've really thought to myself, wow, it must just be so easy for them. And I was just reminded as Carson was talking today how much it does take perseverance and it does take sticking with something and it does take being courageous. And it's so interesting because I do really believe that our lives, when we have experiences that happen and we are able to move through them and move forward from them, we do get the opportunity to learn that valuable knowledge that isn't just book knowledge, that isn't just something that somebody else could come and take away from us, but actually have that as our own and know that that experience, that education, that like school of hard knocks is going to set us on such an amazing path. Let me know, what are your ahas? What were your takeaways from that story? Just knowing how much of a struggle it was. Are you in your 20s? Are you thinking, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Are you in your 30s, kind of building that career? Are you in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and thinking about, how do I continue to move forward in my career, or am I looking at different options? Let me know where you're at and let me know what your ahas were as you listen to that conversation. I'm so curious to know what you are walking away from and what are some of the highlights, some of those things that really stuck out to you. I know that I am just really taking away from that conversation that mic drop moment of stick to it, stick to life, and the stick to it. And I've heard it said stick to itiveness, like sticking to something for longer than what, especially with business. So you don't want to, beat a dead horse or anything like that, but there is something that is very powerful about the staying power, about staying with something long enough to see it all the way through and all the way to the end. But I'm curious, was that your takeaway or what was your takeaway? Let me know in the comments. Can't wait. We are going to sit down and have another conversation with Carson soon, and I will be sure to send that out. Let me know what you want me to ask him. We'll talk soon.